Okay, so pretty interesting topic today, guys, as you would have read in the title already. Persist Step. So, one of the reasons that I'm sharing this Persist Step is that I found it pretty interesting. When I'm working, there was a talk of using this step as a replacement for the typical logging that we do using Groovy script in the message processing log. So I thought, I've not used that excessively in the past. So is this really worth it? And it came out to be I thought it'll be a quick one, but it came out to be pretty challenging in terms of setting it up on my system because and I'll show you the part where I was missing, because and this is what happens when you don't fully read the guide, right? Okay, so first of all, what is the Persist Step? So I've opened the help.sap.com. So Persist Step is basically the prime intention is to store the message at a certain point in time. Okay, example, typically, before the message and message mapping and after the message mapping, there could be scenarios where you're challenged by the third party that, oh, I'm not getting the right message from you, from SAP, right? So that is the kind of troubleshooting where storing the message comes in handy. Of course, you should not do it for all the scenarios, only error scenarios is the guideline. Now, so why the Persist Step, right? And why not the message processing log is probably a separate topic. I am still not 100% convinced that Persist is a better way, but maybe there's a slight hint from SAP towards that. So I'll let you ponder upon that. But this is in a nutshell what the Persist Step is. And what SAP is doing these days, or is doing already from some time already now, is now they're providing you pre-made iFlows on most of the learning topics. For example, in this case, we have this one of the package in the broader package of SAP design guidelines, which is modeling basics use the Persist Step. And in that, this is one of the artifacts. Sorry, I think this is not a package, but this is an iFlow. Sorry, yes, it's an iFlow. Okay, so this is one of the iFlows in a broader package. Okay, so if you can see, this is the iFlow, and I'll show you in the system as well when I run it. So basically, like I was saying, right? So here, although there's no mapping, but there's a simple flow wherein it's being called from outside using HTTPS endpoint, and then there's a persist step in place to store the message. Ultimately, what it does is just stores the message, and then whatever you want to perform. So in this case, they are defining the header and then calling an OData API, then persist the message just before sending, and and then finally defining the final response. So as you can see, the aim of persist here in this scenario is very simple: to store the original source message and then to store the message just before it's going out. So it's the typical archiving mentality or strategy, you can say. It says the first persist step stores the inbound message received by the HTTP client, and the second persist step stores the message after the web shop has been called. Okay, so this is the scenario, and we'll send a very simple payload here, and then after the OData API has been called, it will enhance the payload like this. This is your outbound message, and this is, so both this and this payload are going to be stored in the persist store. Okay, and once that happens, then you should get a response like this, which is a pre-made response using this content modifier by SAP standard iFlow. And then what it does is basically to automate the flow of rest of the. So I've talked about the persist step. Now let me explain you the SAP standard iFlow, which is the series of iFlows, I would say. There are 4 iFlows which are to be executed together if you really want to see the end result of first how a message is persisted, number 1, which is this iFlow right here, and then the next 3 steps are basically to retrieve your payloads, the original payloads. Yeah. And where are they retrieved from? They are retrieved from the message store. Okay. I hope so far so good. If there are any follow-on queries, I'll be happy to answer, but I'll try to cover all the possible questions. So, getting back, what SAP has even made easier for you is now. Let me go to the package itself. Okay, so just opening this, and I'll show you these 4 iFlows. The first one which we've already seen, and the next 3. And I want to show you that SAP also provides the Postman collection. So I really like the. This really sorts out everything, right? This is like a self-tutor. You don't need anybody external to teach you unless you have some doubts, right? So if you see here, modeling basics, Postman collection. This is a Postman collection to execute the integration flows. I can download this. I've already done that in the past, so I'll not do that again. It will download in a zip format, which you need to unzip like this, and then you'll find a JSON file. For those of you who have worked with Postman before, you should already know that. And these are the artifacts. So first one we saw already, right? The use a persist step, right? So let's just show you real quick. Right, this is the same. And then so where is the other one? Yeah, I've opened some of the tabs. I don't want to close them because I want to show you some of the information, keeping the video not too long still. Okay, so this is the second one. Let me go here, close the CPI helper. Oh, sorry, that is the name of the Postman request. Oh, okay, my bad. No, okay. So the other 3 are actually calling the standard OData APIs. So you'll not find it here. So there's only one iFlow, okay? And as you can see, that is why I've already only deployed that one here. So let me take you to the Postman. So from here, by the way, anybody who does not know it, from here you can select this Postman collection, and that's all. And when you import it, you will see this modeling basics. So it's a whole collection, right? And what we are concerned for this video is about the collection for Persist Step. Okay. Now here, this one is calling the other the iFlow which I just showed you. The second iFlow, essentially what it does is it calls the standard OData API of your CPI tenant. So in this case, we're calling the message processing logs API, and further the endpoint of message store entries. And the credentials here will be the API credentials of your process integration runtime. I'll show you that part as well because I believe that is important. So I've called it as a default, which you get. Basically, you get everything configured, right? And in the auth type, it is selected as inherit auth from parent. You need to change that to OAuth 2.0 and then configure the credentials accordingly. Just note that what credentials you use here in the first iFlow, where it's an actual iFlow which is doing a functionality and also doing the persist step, versus the credentials which you will use to call the OData APIs will be separate. The CID is usually same, but the secret will be separate. It's a separate credential altogether. Okay. Now, so this API, when it calls, basically, okay, let's do a run. Okay, a run through of all these 4, and then I'll show you an actual run also. So the first step, persist step, what it does is basically it executes that iFlow, and it by executing this iFlow, it does a persist, right? And also does this regular job, right? Persist of the inbound message and outbound message. Okay. Let me show you once. Let me get a new token. Okay, so success, you get a message back which is just explaining how to call the subsequent iflow, blah blah blah. And here, as you can see, all these steps are duly executed. Another interesting fact here is if you go to okay, I'm just trying to find a property. Okay, I think it's in the log. Yeah. So if you see, it recognizes that this is a persist step, and it also gives you a coded location of the persist as well. So this is stored in the message store. You see, it says SAP message store, persist outbound is a step name, encrypt payload is equal to true. So basically, in the persist step, you have an option to encrypt the stored message. So if I maybe uncheck this, it will show me the actual message as well, right? But it's obviously not recommended. Okay, so now we are sure that, and we can see the proof that it's actually stored in there. But note that this you will not be able to see in the monitoring tab, unlike the message processing logs. Let's see that part as well. And this is where I don't like this, because yeah, so this is my latest message. If you can see, I can just see the regular stuff. There's no attachment or there's no mention of that message in the log as well. Okay, but if you would have done the message processing logs using Groovy, it will show you here as an attachment. Okay, all right, so now up to the next step. Okay, it executed successfully. So basically this is not very readable for everyone, but in a nutshell, basically what it is doing is it is retrieving that message processing log ID, right? This is the ID, and if you can see, the message store ID is persist inbound, which is our step name, and all the basic properties, right? And similarly, if you see, it will also show you persist outbound. So basically what it retrieved is all those entries. It retrieved everything for those two entries, right? For the message processing. Okay, so now this, what it will do is each of this step is also setting up some headers. If you see MPL_ID, right? So how are we getting this? This is not through the iflow, because obviously this is a OData API, right? Standard. So using the Postman script feature, we are getting the inbound message store ID, so a unique MPL ID for the inbound message, and similarly for the outbound message. Okay, and if I execute this, it is correctly getting the product. Similarly for the outbound. Okay, so hope you were able to follow. I know, but unless you download it and do a few rounds, you won't probably be able to grasp it fully. Just one point I wanted to share before we close the session is that I was, what was happening with me is this step was always working fine, right? So I had obviously it generated both of these instances. Earlier this instance name was something else, and rt_iflow, I have the service key, right? It's signed out, so I'm just logging it back in. So I have a service key using which I need to, I can execute any iflow from my tenant. So that I had generated already. Typically you won't have access to this. You will have access to this on your trial tenant only, but otherwise you can reach out to basis for this, but you should know what to ask, right? So iflow, like I said, I had this, and this is all keyed in here. It was always working fine. but this step was not working fine. So it was able to reach it, but I was getting forbidden error 403. So 403, if I can somehow show you the logs, I think the old logs are clear now. Yeah. Okay, anyways. And so it was clear that 403 comes because you don't have the right authorization. Okay. So I said, I also made sure that this is the way it's done, right? So typically, just note, this is very important. Not everybody is very clear about this. So though that is an auditor API, you don't need a proper API management to be enabled there, right? What you need is a API instance, right, of the API plan of the service process integration runtime. So basically, you need an instance of service process integration runtime with the API plan. So basically, you'll find two options: API and integration flow. Obviously, you need the integration flow for sure, so that you have the ability to execute your iFlows from outside using a Postman or any other API calling service. But you also need an API to be able to do other functions. Like one of those functions is calling the standard OData APIs, right? So this was always created, right? So then what was the problem? Still, I was not able to call. Then, I did a lot of things, did a lot of variety of things. I even went to the scale of going to the users here. Ultimately, I went to the role collection. I created a brand new role collection with all the roles required, basically. Not just required, I just created everything, right? I probably still have that if I'm, this is the one, right? Messages. And I added all the roles which was listed and maybe a few extra which were needed to read the monitoring data. Okay, this is the monitoring data ultimately which we are trying to read, right? The message stored data. And then what I did was I assigned the CID, right? So that CID from the service key, right? If you see here, let me open the parallel tab. So basically, this CID has been assigned all the roles, right? Now there should not be a problem, right? But it was still not working, right? What was still not working? These three, right, which need the standard OData API. So ultimately, what I did, like it went on for one full day, right? So ultimately, what I did was I decided to go with the basics, right? So that's why these tabs are open, right? I read from basics, step by step, what I'm missing, right? Especially this portion, set up the inbound HTTP connections for API, and I thought I was of the opinion that I've done everything right. Then when this point hit me, I think there's a point where so I thought there was a step by step to set up this, although this is hinting towards iFlow, right? To generate the service key and create an instance, right? So what I thought was, why not I create it again? Maybe I'm missing something, right? So what I did was basically I went to this instances again and again created this. So in that process, I found what I'm missing. How is that? While you're creating this, right? So yeah, in this step, it asks for a role. Okay, and I think somehow this is not somehow, obviously, because I'm specifying the role here. The service key that is generated afterwards then is bound, right? That user is now bound to this, right? So just assigning the role collection or the roles to the service key user will not help, as it is already proven in my case. But if you, while creating this, so that is why I think I'm not faced this issue in any of my projects where I'm really working for a client, and that explains, right? The basis people and the security people really do their job well, right? So they know their business, right? So we don't do this every day, though we know how to do this, right? So that is where you get the right permission. So whenever, let's say, you're doing for your client and other things, you ask two kind of credentials from your basis or security team. One is for the iFlow, for the integration flow plan of process integration runtime, and the second is the API plan of the process integration runtime. Okay, so that was the Persist step. Just one last thing, what I want to talk about is Persist versus MPL log ID. Let me just try this. I really like the AI feature of the Google search these days. Persist. So let me just say BTP CPI Persist versus MPL using Groovy. Sometimes it does a nice job. So what I read earlier was basically in the general analysis, it comes out to be that MPL is more for a debugging purpose and Persist is more for an auditing purpose. Right, so let's read what it says. The persist step in integration flow allows you to explicitly save the message payload at a specific point during processing. This save payload can be retrieved later, for example, for auditing and reprocessing or analysis. Right, so that's what I was saying. Groovy scripts can be used to dynamically control persistence based on certain conditions. Right, so although using a router, you can do an optional persist as well. Like in our case, in typically in the client in the firm that I'm working with, they're the guideline that we're coming up with that only in the case of exception or error handling scenarios, you should persist the message. But this is what I like about Groovy is that generally what we do is we create a property, which is obviously configurable in production as well. And then we dynamically control whether, let's say, mostly it will be a no, but based on the log level, you can persist the message, right? System log level, or let's say there's a problem coming up in a particular iFlow, then you switch on the logs for a certain period of time, do your analysis, and then switch it off, right? So all of those things. So I really hope this was an honest opinion of me on this topic and honest effort to teach you this. Hope it helps you. I know sometimes I receive comments about the way I speak, and people also say use AI voice and all. That's okay. I mean, this is a free content, guys, so I'm just sharing what I can in the best possible way. Your suggestions are always welcome, but I appreciate you sharing it to a wider audience if you like it, only if you like it. Thank you so much.